Hey, this is Andy here with Libertarian Revolution. And today I'd like to talk to you about the Libertarian Party's Shiny Badge Caucus. What am I referring to by the Shiny Badge Caucus, and what exactly is a shiny badge? Well, a shiny badge in this case is being used to denote candidates who have fancy credentials next to their name. Now, those fancy credentials could be that they're a former elected official, and in the eyes of the Shiny Badge Caucus, the higher the office a prospective candidate has held, the shinier the badge. Other shiny badges could be that they're a celebrity of some type, maybe a corporate CEO, or they owned a business, or maybe they held a high rank in the military. And there are people in the Libertarian Party who think that the Libertarian Party should focus on running candidates with these type of shiny badges, particularly for high-level offices. Now, I want to say I'm not necessarily opposed to candidates having shiny badge credentials. I think shiny badge credentials can certainly be an enhancement for candidates. So if a candidate has a shiny badge, that can certainly be a plus. Although these shiny badges are not a substitute for being good on the issues and philosophy and having a background as an actual libertarian activist, and also being a person of good character, a person who keeps their word, a person who doesn't have a reputation for being a liar. And so the problem with the Libertarian Party's Shiny Badge Caucus is they want to throw all of those things, issues, philosophy, background as a libertarian, personal credibility. They will throw all of those things out the window in the name of having candidates who have shiny badge credentials. And therein lies the problem with the Libertarian Party Shiny Badge Caucus. Now, what are the motivations of the Shiny Badge Caucus? Are they just, inept? Are they desperate, so desperate for success that they're willing, or promises of success, that they're willing to throw all of these issues of credibility and actually being a libertarian and background as an activist out the window just for promises of success? Are these people who are just basically trying to sabotage the Libertarian Party? I don't know. I can't get inside their heads, so I don't know what their motivations are. I would likely say that it's probably a combination of the factors that I just mentioned. But whatever their motivations are, I think it's very dangerous to throw all of those things, where do they stand on the issues and libertarian philosophy and how to implement libertarian philosophy, and do they have an actual background as a libertarian? And when I say background as a libertarian, I don't mean somebody who was just, good on one or two issues, or was sort of libertarian on, some issue. I mean somebody that has a background of supporting liberty on a lot of issues, across the board. And now, I'm not saying that candidates have to be perfect. There's probably no such thing as a perfect candidate, and we all probably have different ideas of what a perfect candidate is. And I don't know if there's anyone out there who is going to, that I'm going to agree with 100% on every detail of every issue. You get a room full of libertarians together, and you're going to have some disagreements, So, but, do you agree with somebody 90% of the time? Do you agree with them 95% of the time? Maybe 98, 99% of the time? Even if you don't agree with them 100% of the time? So, if so, then I think that you can, find people that you can work with and can support. So anyway, having said that, so I'm not necessarily opposed to candidates having shiny badge credentials. I think they can certainly enhance a candidate. But when you throw issues and philosophy and background as a libertarian and personal credibility out the window in the name of having, these shiny badge candidates, it's a very destructive thing. And that's how the Libertarian parties ended up with candidates like Bob Barr and Wayne Root and Bill Weld and Gary Johnson. I don't think any of these people were legitimate libertarians, and ultimately I think running candidates like that actually damages the Libertarian Party. It hurts the credibility of the party, and it ultimately hurts the movement. And some people, they've pointed to Gary Johnson and Bill Weld getting a relatively good vote total, certainly by Libertarian Party standards and by third party standards. But you also have to take into consideration that in 2016 it was like the easiest set of circumstances that the Libertarian Party had ever fielded a presidential ticket, because there were record levels of disgust with the major party candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And there was no other third party, minor party, or independent candidate that made the ballot in all 50 states plus DC, and that was better funded. And so, there was no Ross Perot, no Ralph Nader, no John Anderson, no Pat Buchanan to contend with. And so the Libertarian Party picked up a lot of protest votes in the election. I've gone out and talked to a lot of members of the public, because I frequently talk to people about politics, and I've done a lot of petition signature gathering to get Libertarian candidates on the ballot. And the feedback that I've gotten from a lot of people is that that voted for Johnson and Weld was that it was a protest vote, because they didn't like Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and there was not really a whole lot of real enthusiasm for Gary Johnson and Bill Weld. And in fact, most people think that the Libertarian Party screwed up by nominating them. And their campaign didn't really lead to any real growth in the Libertarian Party. There was a little bit of a spike in membership, but a year later, membership had dropped down to what it was, about what it was before their campaign. So I don't think their campaign was any great success. And I think actually in the long term, I think it actually damaged the reputation of the Libertarian Party. So anyway, I don't think that it's good for the Libertarian Party to run candidates who have shiny badges but are lacking in the other areas. Okay, so if you're judging a candidate, you got to look at, again, where do they stand on issues in philosophy, and do they have backgrounds as being libertarian activists? And again, that activism doesn't necessarily have to be in the Libertarian Party, but they should have a background of supporting the philosophy of liberty on a spectrum of issues, not just one or two issues. And the other thing is, does this person have a record of keeping their word? Are they a liar like Bill Weld? And if so, then they shouldn't be nominated. So do not put shiny badge credentials over the other things that I mentioned. So anyway, I've recently heard that Lincoln Chafee, who's a former governor and United States Senator from Rhode Island, I believe he was at one point elected as a Republican. Then I think he got elected as I believe an independent, and then he switched to Democrat. And then I think he ran for president in the Democrat primaries and did pretty badly in the last election. And anyway, he's recently joined the Libertarian Party and now saying that he's open to running for the presidential nomination. And I suspect that the Libertarian Party's Shiny Badge Caucus will get really enthused about this guy because he's a former elected Republican governor and senator. I believe is a Democrat or independent and then a Democrat. And so they're going to be in awe of his shiny badge credentials. Well, I would reject Lincoln Chafee as a candidate for president because the guy has no background of being a libertarian. He just showed up in the Libertarian Party, and now he's talking about moving to the top of the party, the top of the party's ticket by running for president. No. That's, to me, that's not acceptable. You got to go out and prove yourself as a libertarian first, and maybe I would consider you as a candidate for president. But you don't come in with no background as being a libertarian and then go straight to the head of the class. At least you shouldn't. That's not the way it should work. Now, there's also been talk of rumors about Justin Amash possibly joining the Libertarian Party and running for the party's presidential nomination. I'm not totally on the Amash bandwagon. The latest I've heard about Amash is that he's going to run for re-election. He's been elected Republican, U.S. House member out of Michigan, and for several years, and he's talking about running for re-election now. Actually, as an independent. And so he may not be coming to the Libertarian Party, but there was talk of him coming to the Libertarian Party and running for the presidential nomination. And I would be more open to Amash coming in and running for president than I would with somebody like a Lincoln Chafee or a Bill Weld, because at least Amash has a track record of being pretty libertarian. I mean, like I said, I'm not completely sold on the guy, but I've looked into his voting record, and the guy, he's got a pretty good voting record. He's got a pretty libertarian record. So at least he's been elected as a Republican, but at least you could say he's a libertarian leaning Republican. And so although considering that on the Libertarian Party's last three presidential tickets, both the presidential candidates and vice presidential candidates have all come in from the Republican Party, and all but 2008 vice presidential nominee Wayne Allen Root, he was not a former elected official, but he was, pretty active in the Republican Party. But everybody else who was on the last three presidential tickets were former elected Republicans. And I don't think any of them were really what I would call libertarians. I mean, at best, you'd call them maybe watered down libertarians, or, maybe not even libertarians at all. And I kind of lean towards them, none of them having actually been libertarians at all. Yeah, that's my opinion. And anyway, so if the Libertarian Party runs somebody who's heavily identified with the Republican Party, like Justin Amash, then it kind of makes it look like the Libertarian Party is the home for cast-off Republicans, and that's not a very good image to have. I think the Libertarian Party really should be building up its own people, building its own stars, from within the actual Libertarian Party, and it's rather a sad commentary on the party that the party has been failing to do that. But anyway, at least in the case of somebody like Justin Amash, at least he's got at least a pretty libertarian record, so I'll give him that. But it looks like at this point he's not, it might be a moot point, because the last I've heard is that he's going to run for re-election to Congress as an independent. But anyway, going back to 1988, Ron Paul came in, having been a former elected Republican congressman for several terms from the 1970s to the early 80s. And, Ron Paul got nominated to run for president. And I think he did a good job and inspired a lot of people. And then, he back in the 90s, he I guess it was in 1996, he got reelected to Congress, as a Republican, and then, stayed in the U.S. House for several terms and ran for president in 2008 and in 2012. And his campaign inspired a lot of people. And in fact, Ron Paul's campaigns for president in the Republican primaries in 2008 and 2012 were more radically libertarian than the last three libertarian presidential campaigns. You'd have to go back to the 2004 Libertarian Party for President campaign of Michael Badnarik to find anything that was as libertarian as the Ron Paul campaigns were. But anyway, so Ron Paul had shiny badge credentials, and in his case, the shiny badge credentials were an enhancement because Ron Paul had an actual track record of being a libertarian. Now he was a libertarian in the Republican Party, and some people have a few criticisms of Ron Paul, and I think they're kind of nitpicking in my opinion. But Ron Paul has been a libertarian since like the 1960s, and he got elected to Congress in the 70s, and he had a pretty darn good track record. I think you'd have a hard time finding an elected official that had as good of a track record as Ron Paul had. If there's anybody out there, I don't know who that person is, and it's probably not anybody who's been in office in recent decades. But anyway, so to sum up here, do not throw libertarian principles and background as an activist and the credibility of a person, their integrity, those things out the window in the name of nominating shiny badge candidates. It's something that's ultimately destructive for the party, and I would rather have a candidate that has no credentials next to their name, but they're have a background as a libertarian activist, they're strong on philosophy and issues, and they have good character, over somebody who is weak in those areas, but they were a former, elected Republican governor, or a former Republican congressman, or a Democrat senator, or a Democrat congressman, or whatever, or some sort of a celebrity. But they're weak in these other areas, then I don't want that person as a candidate. Now, if you have somebody, again, that has the shiny badge credentials and they're also strong on issues and philosophy and activism and character, then, by all means, that person could be a really good candidate. So like I said, there's not necessarily anything wrong with having shiny badge credentials. And the problem is when you throw all that other stuff, you throw principles and philosophy and character out the window in the name of getting the shiny badge. And that's my problem with the Libertarian Party Shiny Badge Caucus. And that's why I urge people to beware of the Libertarian Party Shiny Badge Caucus. Anyway, that's it for now. If you got any comments, leave them in the comments section below, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks.